Hi, Kent Logston, the Deputy Chief of Mission here at U.S. Embassy Berlin, and Chairman Hassett. Very warm welcome to Berlin. As key
Thanks.
economic advisor to the President, we're very honored to have you today with us to speak about the administration's economic agenda.
Oh, thanks. It's a real honor to be here.
Well, got to start out first with your past.
Mhm.
You speak German, you've studied, and you've worked in Germany. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about a favorite memory of your time in Germany? And of course,
Yeah.
how did your experience in Germany connect you to what you're doing today?
I think that one of the most important moments in my life was that my German class in high school spent some time at a gymnasium in Heinsberg over near Dusseldorf. And we came to Berlin for a week and stayed out at this little youth home in Niklassee. And during that time, I went and visited East Berlin. And so it'd been 1978 or so, maybe. And I was stunned as just a high school student at how terrible it was in East Berlin. I mean, the buildings were ugly. There was one restaurant we went to, and it had no food practically, and like one thing on the menu, and so on. And I think it's one of the most important moments of my life because what happened was that I started thinking, geez, there's this communism thing and there's capitalism, and the U.S. academics have been telling us that the communism is going to defeat us because they're centrally planned and that's a better way to organize. But I just went to their showcase city and it was terrible. And so this communism must really not be that effective. And so I started thinking about it, and before I knew it, I was studying economics as an undergraduate at Swarthmore. And then while I was at Swarthmore, I spent my junior year abroad at the University of Hamburg.
So a very direct connection.
Yeah, that's right.
That's great. You're also an expert, of course, on public finance, and you were instrumental in crafting the administration's signature tax reform, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017. Maybe you could give us a couple of thoughts about why tax reform was necessary in the U.S. and how is it affecting the U.S. economy, and of course, how will it affect the global economy?
Yeah, I would say that the tax reform in the fall was really one of the great honors of my life. I have been studying tax policy since I was in graduate school. Almost all of my peer-reviewed publications are in tax policy. And so to suddenly be there in the White House while the biggest tax change in a generation was going on is something that I just feel very privileged to have experienced. I think that the U.S. tax code, according to my own work and a lot of work done by many other scholars, needed to be fixed. And President Trump prioritized that when he got into office. He said, let's get that tax code fixed right away. And we did. And that's a historic accomplishment, one that I think it'll be decades before somebody accomplishes it again.
That's great. Another administration priority is streamlining regulation to reduce regulatory costs for businesses and for households. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your activities, your efforts to achieve the right balance of regulation that's going to promote economic growth and competitiveness.
Sure. Deregulation is a big part of the president's agenda as well. And there are lots of different ways to measure regulation, but under President Obama, regulations in the U.S. grew about 8% a year. And so if you're someone who likes to extrapolate growth rates, what that means is that if we ran that experiment a little bit longer, then regulatory costs would have been all of GDP, right? It had to be rolled back. And so the president has very aggressively prioritized rolling back regulation as well. He began it day one, and I think we're already seeing the benefits from his deregulatory agenda. Now, when we talk deregulation, then sometimes people think, oh, well, the endangered species are all going to die and there's going to be smoke in the skies and so on. I think particularly this audience might be sort of intrigued to learn that we, in the economic report of the president, estimate that if the U.S. could reduce its regulation to that of Germany, then it would be a regulatory cost to that of Germany, then it would add about 1% to GDP over the next decade. And if we could get all the way to as deregulated as the Netherlands, then we could get 2%. And so we're not talking about dark satanic skies or anything like that at all. It's just that the Democrats in the previous administration really let regulation run out of control, and we're trying to roll some of that back.
It's a fascinating comparison. Bringing it back to Germany, the U.S. Treasury, the IMF, OECD, and others have all called on Germany to reduce the large current account surplus by boosting public investment and implementing some structural reforms. According to you, what policy options are available to countries with large external imbalances like Germany? And what are the implications if these imbalances persist?
Well, I think there are a lot of causes of Germany's imbalances, but there are some things that they can fix right away and then other things that maybe need to be studied in the long run and debated amongst economists. The things that could be fixed right away, I think, is that they could increase their defense spending, and they could have a corporate tax reform, and I think really those two would have the biggest near-term effect. I think in the long run, questions that all Europeans are going to have to think about are relate to what's the optimal currency area, what does it mean for a big, cautious country like Germany, where people have very high savings rates and the government tends to run a surplus, to be in a currency zone with other countries that have different attitudes towards those things.
Great. Chairman Hassett, thank you so much
Thank
for
you so
taking a
much
little
for the
time to
time.
talk with us. Your trip to Berlin, I think, is going to be very important to engage German policymakers
I
from
hope so.
lots of different parts, and we're really glad to have you here. And
Thanks.
welcome back.
Thanks. Great to be here.